Hello everyone, we're on chapter 11 and we're on paragraph 1. Chapter 11 covers the topic of world purpose and life purpose, the ordering of man's destiny. So let's get started. Among the manifold currents in the spiritual life of mankind, there is one to be followed up which can be described as the overcoming of the concept of purpose in spheres where it does not belong. Purposefulness is a special kind of sequence of phenomenon. True purposefulness really exists only if, in contrast to the relationship of cause and effect where the earlier event determines the latter, the reverse is the case, and the latter event influences the earlier one. To begin with, this happens only in the case of human actions. One performs an action of which one has previously made a mental picture, and one allows this mental picture to determine one's action. Thus, the latter, the deed, influences the earlier, the doer, with the help of the mental picture. For there to be a purposeful connection, this detour through the mental picture is absolutely necessary. In paragraph 1 is summarized as follows. True purposefulness only exists if the effect influences the cause. This only occurs in the sphere of human action. The deed, that is the effect, influences the cause, that is the doer. And this begins with the doer's mental picture. So basically this paragraph starts off by talking about the concept of purpose, and that is part of the whole concept of freedom. It's an important topic, that of purpose, and Steiner is pointing out that purposefulness is a special kind of sequence of phenomenon, and he basically points out that purposefulness is really the reverse of cause and effect. So cause and effect we can see when he talked about the example of the billiard ball. When we see a billiard ball hit another one, and then it creates this effect where the other one goes that way and whatnot. Purposefulness would be the example of the effect influences the cause. So let's say on the pool table, I want the ball to go in like this corner. So it's going to affect how I'm going to hit the ball. So that is really the purpose demonstrated as the reverse. And the main point, again, that Steiner is pointing out is that it's basically true purposefulness is just the reverse process of this sequence of events of cause and effect. So purposefulness is really an effect and then the cause. So the effect that you want is going to affect the doer, that is the cause, and then that's what's going to set things in motion. And as well, for a purpose to exist, you need to use the mental picture, and that's really also a key point. So those are the two key points in this paragraph, and we're going to go on to paragraph 2. In a process which breaks down into cause and effect, we must distinguish percept from concept. The percept of the cause precedes the percept of the effect. Cause and effect would simply remain side by side in our consciousness if we were not able to connect them with one another through their corresponding concepts. The percept of the effect must always follow upon the percept of the cause. If the effect is to have a real influence upon the cause, it can only do so by means of the conceptual factor. For the perceptual factor of the effect simply does not exist prior to the perceptual factor of the cause. Anyone who declares that the blossom is the purpose of the root, that is, that the former influences the latter, can do so only with regard to that factor in the blossom which is established in it by his thinking. The perceptual factor of the blossom is not yet in existence at the time when the root originates. For a purposeful connection to exist, it is not only necessary to have an ideal law-determined connection between the latter and the earlier, but the concept, the law, of the effect must really influence the cause, that is, by a means of a perceptible process. A perceptible influence of a concept upon something else, however, is to be observed only in human actions. Hence, this is the only sphere in which the concept of purpose is applicable. The naive consciousness, which regards as real only what is perceptible, attempts, as we have repeatedly pointed out, to introduce perceptible elements where only ideal elements are to be found. In the perceptible course of events, it looks for perceptible connections, or failing to find them, it simply invents them. The concept of purpose, valid for subjective actions, is an element well suited for such invented connections. The naive man knows how he brings an event about, and from this he concludes that nature will do it in the same way. In the connections of nature, which are purely ideal, he finds not only invisible forces but also invisible real purposes. Man makes his tools according to his purposes. The naive realist would have the Creator build organisms on the same formula. Only very gradually is this mistaken concept of purpose disappearing from the sciences. In philosophy, even today, it still does a good deal of mischief. Here people still ask after the extra-mundane purpose of the world, the extra-human ordering of man's destiny, and consequently also his purpose, and so on. And paragraph 2 is summarized as follows. The concept of purpose is only applicable to the sphere of actions. For the naive realist, he believes that because humans create tools for a purpose, the Creator probably built organisms like fish and horses for a purpose. Again, the naive realist is bringing into this topic perceptible elements where only ideal elements are to be found. A necessary ingredient for an action to have purpose is to have the ideal conceptual component. This paragraph is really long, but it's really basically pretty simple. He points out that, again, the concept of purpose only applies to human actions, and he said that in paragraph 1. That was also a main point of paragraph 1 that I forgot to mention. But the main point in paragraph 2 is that purpose only applies to our actions, and that purpose needs a concept. I'm just going to give an example of how we can see purpose illustrated. Let's say that the effect that I want to create is, say I want to win gold in whatever event for the Olympics. So that effect that I desire, it begins with the mental picture. So that's what Steiner means when he talks about you need the conceptual, that is the ideal component, that's what is the purpose. And so the effect that I want to create is winning the gold, and then it's going to influence me because now I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to train a lot. I'm going to meet with coaches. I'm going to do all this actions so that I create this effect. And each of these actions have a purpose. And so that's what he means about purpose. That's what he means by having the effect influence the cause. So that is an example of how purpose can be found in human actions. And then what Steiner does is bring up how the naive consciousness, because they introduce perceptible elements into something that is really only involving the ideal world, as Steiner mentions, and as I stated earlier as well, basically a necessary ingredient for an action is to have purpose, is to have an ideal conceptual component. And so this is sort of the problem with these naive realists, is that if they look for perceptible connections, and if they fail to find them, they just invent various reasons. I guess in Steiner's time, that was probably done a lot in science, was where they would just invent all these purposes of things rather than just merely observing what's going on. And he cites the example of how humans have made tools for their own purposes, and so a flaw in their belief system is that, well, they assume that, you know, the Creator probably built organisms for the same purpose. You know, the Creator invented these creations for a purpose rather than just creating for the sake of creating. So that's also the main point in that paragraph, is just how that's caused some trouble in the world of science. But I don't really know if that's too applicable for today. It might be, I'm not quite sure. So again, those are the main points as well. Paragraph 1, I forgot to mention, the whole idea of purposefulness, it sort of implies that it's done consciously, because if you're having a mental picture, you have to really be aware that you have a purpose in your mind, and you have to be really awake to that idea that you have in your mind. So again, paragraph 2, the main points is that it's only applicable in the sphere of human actions, and that a necessary ingredient is the ideal element. And basically For naive realists, they assume that, you know, the creations of the organisms of the world basically have a purpose because, well, we humans have created tools for a purpose, so therefore they assume that the creator is following the same formula. And so that's basically all we're going to cover for today. Hopefully that example of what purpose is, basically a purpose is sort of a goal. So hopefully my example clarifies the whole concept of purpose. So if you have any comments or questions, just send me a message. Have a good day. Bye.